Okay. Okay, I think we're there. So traffic calming is a residential program. I'm going to stand over here so I can advance these slides. As opposed to more commercial streets, more industrial streets, we stick to residential streets like we have here in Haynes Manor. We do focus on physical solutions. We had a little short discussion before this meeting about signage and things. We used to have a pretty bare bones process where we didn't do a lot of things in the street. It was more of signage and maybe some pavement markings and things, but we have learned over the years that nothing slows traffic down like putting something in the road that drivers have to encounter, either to drive around or to drive over. And so we really do focus on that. We find those to be by far the most effective type of treatment. We're focused on reducing speeds. That may sound obvious, but that's as opposed to trying to stop cut-through traffic. We know that we think, looking at the traffic patterns, there's a pretty good amount of cut-through traffic between Buena Vista and Whites Creek, and that's right through Rowe and Revels Lane, some of the streets that we're looking at. And so we're not really trying to force people to go a different way. We're just trying to get them to drive responsibly when they do come through the neighborhood. And then lastly, this is not focused on any one spot that may be an issue for us. It's meant to calm traffic over longer lengths of neighborhood streets. Get rid of that. This is a street program. It's not a neighborhood program, although this project, the Haynes Manor project, is a neighborhood project. We have changed the program since, and so now what we really do is focus on individual streets. And I'll make that a little bit clearer here when we look at a map, but we're talking more about, you all were in a previous cohort of projects where we really were doing holistic neighborhood projects, and so this is a much bigger project than what we typically do nowadays. That is really bothering me that we got all this stuff on here, but let's see if I can get rid of that. And I think I've covered most of that stuff. We'll talk about some of the competitive. One thing we do like to point out, and by the way, Councilmember Toombs is on the way. She's not here, but this slide always reminds me of council and elected folks, because we have some tools in our program dealing with speed and traffic control, but there's a lot of stuff that you all may be interested in that we do not do. And so I always like to plug Hub Nashville. It's a great resource, kind of the first stop for any requests that you have of Metro government, not just related to the Department of Transportation, but all departments are represented there. So that's another good resource for you. We had a slide there a second ago, a bullet that said, talked about the amount of demand for this program. You all are not unusual in the problems that you've been having on your street with cut-through traffic and with speeding. This is very common throughout Davidson County. And we like to show this, and it's kind of surprising to some people. When you all were selected back about a year ago, in that class, there were over 400 streets, just like the ones that you all applied for. Most of those, of course, did not get selected. We select 24 projects twice a year, so we're doing about 50 projects a year, and you all are one of those. And again, you all are one of the legacy projects that we're still working and trying to bring to some conclusion here. The way the neighborhood got into the program was through data that we collect and then a prioritization process that we use. And this details that 70% of the score is based on really speeding metrics that we're collecting or safety metrics. 50% of the score is based on the crashes, and another the speed, 20% is based on crashes. And then that other 30% has to do with more pedestrian type issues, connectivity. Do you have sidewalks or not? Are there places you can walk to? You all didn't score very well on the are there places you can walk to. There aren't a lot of parks and schools, within walking distance to the neighborhood. You did score a little better on the fact that you don't have accommodations, you don't have sidewalks, you don't have bike lanes. I know you have some transit that does come through. That actually raises your score, because if you got transit but can't get to it, that's not such a good thing. And so traffic calming can help in that, and so that helped raise your score as well. The streets that we're looking at, and this becomes important for that last slide, are these. It's Rowan Drive, Revels, Lane, and Mormon's Arm. When you all applied, you applied for Rowan, Revels, Mormon's Arm, and Buena Vista, okay? These are the ones that through the course of the first meeting, and we talked about this and where some of the issues were, that we have decided to move forward with. Mormon's Arm was actually the one that the data pointed to that said this is why you need traffic calming. Now, what's interesting about Mormon's Arm, and I'll speak to Buena Vista as well, is that they're classified a little bit differently. So when we started by saying this is a residential street program, we almost always stick to streets like Revels, Rowan, and Lane that are classified as local streets. Mormon's Arm and Buena Vista are not classified as local streets. They're classified as something called collectors, which just means they're a little bit higher level of road. They're typically a little bit faster. The traffic volume is a little bit higher. And so they're meant to carry traffic in a different way. And so typically we don't look at those streets for traffic calming. In the case of Mormon's Arm, we have looked at it for a couple of reasons, because one, it's limited length. It's pretty finite. It connects one place to another. It is also very residential. You might not can see this from back there, but you all know the street. It's lined with houses, really just like a lot of these others are, and they don't sit back off the road very far either. And then also looking at the speed, the amount of speed that we had on that, we feel like this one is kind of an exception to the rule when we're looking at collector streets, and we've decided to engage on it. We're going to treat it a little bit differently. I'll talk to you about that, but that's why. The rest of these got brought in because of Mormon's Arm. And again, the way the process was working back then was we selected this one, but when we came and had our first meeting, and you know, people were talking about some of the issues, we agree, and these had been applied for, we agreed to bring them in and treat them under the same program as well. Yes, sir.
You mentioned about collector street. What are the other ones again?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So Mormon's Arm is a collector, and that one's highlighted so it doesn't look very purple, but the collectors are the purple ones. Buena Vista is a collector. I'm not sure what some of these are, but in this area, Buena Vista and Mormon's are collectors. The red one is Whites Creek Pike. Red indicates an even higher classification, that being an arterial street. So we don't put traffic calming on those at all. So these are the four streets that we're looking at in this program. Any question on that?
So Rebels, what are they classified as?
Those are local streets. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A little bit about where we are in the process. So when we were here a few months ago, we were back here at meeting 1, and of course, you all have applied to the program. You've been selected. You've gotten through that prioritization process. We had meeting 1 where we presented a draft concept. We got some comment from that and have come back and refined that a little bit. We've done some more detailed site walkthroughs on some of these streets. And we're at meeting 2, and I'm going to present to you the refined proposal. It's still a proposal at this point, and talk to you about what's in that. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about that online ballot and where do we go from this point. So I'm going to show you before we show you on the map what the plan consists of, it's often helpful to think about what are these things that we're talking about. I'm going to throw out a term like speed cushions. I want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about when we say that. So speed cushions are really the bread and butter of this program. A lot of people, when they think of metro traffic calming, this is what they think of, and they're not wrong. We use it on 95+% of the projects that we do. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, we know how drivers interact with them. It's not a surprise. Secondly, we use these modular speed cushions because it's consistent every time. We use the same vendor, the same manufacturer, so what we're proposing here is what we're putting in Antioch, is what we're putting in Green Hills, is what we're putting in wherever. And so we've had a really good track record with them. And then lastly, we know they're effective. We know they slow traffic down. So the particulars of this is these are about 3 inches tall, that height, and then they vary in the length of them. This one that you're looking at here is a 10.5-foot speed cushion. They go down to 7 feet, and they go as long as 14 feet. And the reason why that's important is because the longer they are, the more gentle they are, which means you can go faster over them. So the shorter ones are 7 feet, and they're going to slow you down the most. When you hit them, you know it. The longer you get gives us a little more speed. They're just a little more comfortable. And so that becomes important, again, for this neighborhood because we're proposing a couple of different lengths of those. We also put them in configurations like this. We can do 2 across. We can do 3 across. I think I've got a picture there. Your streets are very wide. Rowan is, I think, 38 feet from curb to curb. That's a wide street. Even when cars are parked, that probably still feels pretty wide. Contrast that to Mormon's Arm, which is 22 feet with no curb. Just edge of pavement is 22 feet across. So it's almost half the width. So we'll have to vary how we do it. Mormon's Arm will get a set of 2. I think all the other streets will get sets of 3. What we're trying to do here is just avoid any opportunity for cars to drive around them, because if we give them that opportunity, cars will drive around them, I assure you. The reason why they have the gap in between them is like you see here, is for emergency vehicle, larger wheelbase vehicles. They can't straddle them completely. They still have to slow down a little bit, but they do minimize impact to, vehicles that need to get through there as quickly as possible. And so we work with the fire department and with police as well, but fire department mainly for their large equipment, and they're certainly aware and supportive of the program as well. I put a little slide up here that's not a wonderful image, but I did want to call this out. Sometimes, and this will happen on Rowan for sure, and potentially Revels as well, even with 3 cushions across, that's still not wide enough. And so what we have to do sometimes is put if you can see this little white stick, it's plastic, flexible delineator. We'll put those sometimes even on the outside, again, just to make it so that cars won't drive around those speed cushions. If they do, you can run over those. It won't, kill your car, but you don't want to do it. I mean, and it'll spring back up. So anyway, I just wanted y'all to see that. We'll come back to this if there are questions about it. Let's talk about the plan here. Any questions about some of those features and all? Yes, ma'am.
Four-wheel vehicles, since I'm thinking that is if you went to stop motorcycles, or does it?
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I mean, any gap, even if we just give a 1-foot gap, a motorcycle can get through there. Yeah, yeah. Okay. It is something that you would have to apply for, and we would go through the same process. So this application, the limits of this one are set, and so we're just discussing what's going to be on those 4 streets. But yeah, any other street can be applied for, and we go through this same process. It'll be rated the same way against all the other requests that we have. If you go to Nashville, I think it's Nashville.TrafficCalming.Gov, you can Google Nashville Traffic Calming, and we have a website, and it's got the application on there and all kind of information about the application process. The next one is coming up in January, so it's a good time to be doing this and talking to your neighbors about it. When you do apply, either we ask that it come through like a homeowners association, or just we have, 3 or 4 of your neighbors that you've discussed it, and think this would be a good fit for your street, and then you apply in that way. Yes, ma'am.
Not too bad, which is very simple.
Yeah, I want to say yes, but I don't know. I can't tell you that I'm familiar with those. There are a couple of streets around town that were done many years ago that may have been built out of asphalt, or that may have been done in maybe a different product. Yeah, it's not going to be a bump. It is a gradual up and across and down. That's a new one. Okay. Yeah. So yes, through the participatory budgeting process, we did use the same equipment that we would use here. Now, it may be a shorter one. It may have been a 7-foot. And so what I'm going to show you is we were going to lengthen that a little bit just to give it a little more comfort. But yeah, essentially it's the same product. Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, that question comes up a lot, and enforcement is a huge part of safety and speed enforcement or speed traffic calming. We just don't have the police. They're not in our toolbox. They have a lot of they're doing a lot of very important things, but we all wish they had more time to do traffic enforcement, but we don't control that and don't have any ability to do that. I think so.
So they will do the extra patrol in a particular area, when they got to move to another area.
Yeah.
So we don't have enough to spread out on every street, but actually, they will push.
And the nice thing about actually putting something in the right of way is it's working 24 hours a day, 365 in a way that when the police, they're out there, and that's very effective while they're there and for, maybe a couple of days afterwards, but then you forget about it and people go back to their habits and all. So let's talk a little bit about where we're proposing these. So to orient you, I know this is not entirely clear from where you're sitting, but this one along here this road is Mormon's Arm Road, where you see the red squares, and this is Whites Creek Pike, and this is Buena Vista. So you're looking at the entire length of that, and the red squares indicate that that's a 14-foot speed cushion. That's the longest one that we offer, and so I think Mormon's Arm is signed at 35. Y'all probably know. I believe it's 35. And so we usually rate these at the point, people can usually drive over those at 25 to 30 miles an hour. And so when we space these out, we're looking for a 400 to 600 feet spacing. And we know when we put them at that frequency, it gets cars, you're not flying in between them and then slow down and then step on the gas to get to the next one. That's consistent enough that it gives us a good continuous slow speed throughout the length of that project. And so we would start these after, there's a section of Mormon's Arm after you turn off Whites Creek there's no houses on it. It's kind of wooded. And then we would start them right before we get to Kravis. Am I saying that right? Just a little bit before there where the neighborhood actually starts, where it feels like, you're now in a neighborhood. We would have our first one there. And then again, good consistent, about 500-foot spacing all the way till we get up to Boatner. Was that last one Boatner? I should have labeled it. I think it's that. And so the last one's right before that. We don't want to put them too close to the signal and the intersection, but we're really pleased with that. We think that'll give us a good result on Mormon's Arm, which is intended to be a little bit higher speed again and a little bit busier. So we think that'll be helpful. One other thing I should point out, when we're spotting these, while we would like to have a really consistent, let's put one every 500 feet, well, we can't do that because you got driveways there, you've got intersections there, sometimes there's hills. We're never going to put one in front of somebody's driveway. We try to keep them at least 15 feet to one side or the other. And so that sometimes dictates where we can put them. There's a couple of streets, I think the one on Lane, it's hard to get one where we weren't in front of somebody's driveway. So we have that issue to contend with as well. As you look at this plan, you see little numbers up here. That just indicates roughly the address that you know, we would have these in the proximity of 641 Mormon's Arm, I think, you know, in that case. So that's how you read that. Coming on up to Rowan, we've got one set in between Buena Vista and the always stop at Crouch. By the way, these little, they probably look like little red circles. They're little red stop signs. Those are the always stops. And so when we're looking to space those, we look at the distance between kind of control points from a major intersection to that always stop, and then we space them out accordingly from there. So we've got one set from Buena Vista to Crouch, 3 sets from Crouch to Cravath, spaced out there through some of those curves. One set again from between the always stops at Revels and Cravath, and then 2 more as you come sort of down the hill toward Whites Creek Pike. This one is almost right across the street from where we are right now. And then Lane Drive is interesting. I don't think it was on the original application, but as we talked to that and as we looked at the data, that is an extremely busy little section. I don't know if anybody lives on Lane, but you can tell it's got about 2,500 cars a day on it. So you can tell traffic is kind of cutting through from Buena Vista to Elm Hill, to Whites Creek on that. So that's why we've got one set there. You know, as you come up the hill, up to Lane, and then it levels out, we've got one set right there to try to calm some of that. What questions do you have about that? All of those are 3 cushion sets except for Mormon's Arm, which are 2 side by side. These would all be, I didn't mention this, those would all be 10.5-foot length. So again, that's about a 25-mile-an-hour speed, which is what you're signed. We think that'll be a good result for that. It's not too jarring. We're getting to where we use those 7-foot ones in more of the much more urban neighborhoods. You guys are a little more suburban. You got a little bit bigger lots. Your houses sit back off of it a little bit more, and we're starting to use those 10.5s more in areas like this, just for comfort, and you know, I think it's a good practice. And still, we're seeing we've used some in West Mead, and have really good data showing a good consistent 25-mile-an-hour speed. Question in the back. Okay.
All agree, but the people on Rowan don't. Will that stop?
Typically what we're doing, and that's probably true here, is that these would all be independent projects. So Mormon's Arm, Rowan, Revels, and Lane would be essentially 4 different ballots. We'll put them all out at the same time, but if they come back and 3 of them pass and 1 of them doesn't, we'll do those 3 for sure. Now, I will say, if we just put 1 at Lane and don't do anything else, I mean, it's going to be worth something, but the effectiveness is going to go way down, I would think. But that doesn't mean you won't do it. It's just going to be, we'll just have to make a decision. I don't think we've ever done one where we just put 1 set at 1 location and said, good luck. That's not the intent of these. We really need a little bit of a run there for them to have much effectiveness and not become a safety issue. So anyhow, we'll look at that and cross that bridge when we get to it, but typically they are independent projects. Okay.
There's a water project, there's a water service that's going to be doing some construction on Rowan Drive, and that's hold up the project. Okay, if that's going to hold up the project on Rowan, can you still go on and do Mormon's Arm, or do you have to do the whole project?
Good question. That's our understanding as well. In fact, that was some of the delay in coming back to you. We wanted to make sure we had the best information from Metro Water about what they were going to do with their project. We understand it's going to be a sewer rehab project, and we think it's going to affect more of this part of Rowan, this upper part. This won't begin, we're told, until late this next summer, so summer of 2023. So we've still got a little time. If we're ready to implement and they're out there with the road torn up, obviously we're not going to come in and put those in. We'll just wait till they're done. And it won't slow anything down. If they're not working on Mormon's Arm and we've already ordered the materials and we're ready, the contractor's ready, they'll go ahead and put those in. And then we'll just come back and finish that when they're done with their work.
What you just said is that going
That would be our intent. I don't think there's any reason why not. Now, well, nobody would stop it, but we may look at it and say, look, they got 2 more weeks and they're done. Let's just wait and let's do it all at once. I mean, when it gets to something like that.
Is that to do anything?
That's the Metro Water project. They're saying we're gonna not start on that sewer rehab project until late next summer. Yes, sir. If we're done and we're ahead, we're gonna go ahead and install. That's the other nice thing about using these. They bolt in, so they can bolt out, and they can take them, set them aside, do their work, come back and put them in when they're done. So, yes, sir. Yeah, I can list them again. Mormon's Arm, from Whites Creek to Buena Vista. Okay. Rowan Drive from Buena Vista to Revels at the all-way stop. Revels from Rowan down to Whites Creek Pike. That's the section we're right here right now, or here. And then Lane Drive from Whites Creek down to Revels. That's the section that this would encompass. Let's talk about the ballot process. We can come back to this if y'all have questions. Oh, by the way, what I just showed you is a good overview, but we will be producing, we've already produced more detailed design plans. Those will go up when we're ready, and you know, if we have consensus here tonight, we can put them up very quickly. They'll be put up on the Nashville.gov NDOT page, and you can click on there and you can go into as much detail as you want to. And so I can tell you, like at Boatner, there's a speed cushion proposed 32 feet west of the driveway at 704 Rowan Drive. That's how much detail we can give you, and you'll at your leisure, you can go in and comb through that and see exactly where we're proposing these. We also have some layouts here, but it's really important when you're voting, you know what you're voting for. So we put all that information out there, and so you and your neighbors can have that. Back to the balloting question, the way the balloting works is once we put that online, we're going to send out cards again. Hopefully you got a card for this meeting if you live in this area. You may not have because you don't live on one of these streets. So let me clarify who is eligible for the voting process. We send these cards out to the people that live on one of those 4 streets that I just mentioned, whose property abuts the right-of-way of that street. Okay, so this is a snapshot of Revels. So this is Rowan, this is Revels. These are the people that are going to get the card. They live right along Revels. Even if your address is Lane or Page Circle, if you live on the corner, your property abuts the affected street and you're going to get a card, okay? One other aspect to that is we send them to the property owner. So if you rent your residence, you're not going to get a card. It's going to go to the owner's address on file, which I know may be California, maybe Michigan, it may be who knows where. They're going to get the card and not the property itself, okay? That's how that works. And it's a 6-week balloting period. This neighborhood, some of y'all may have signed a petition already. This neighborhood did a really great job. Again, under the old system, you're working really hard and trying to go door to door and get these. And what we were finding in neighborhoods is they were running into all kind of obstacles. The landlord was somewhere else. There's just a number of reasons why getting the required number of responses was very difficult for a lot of neighborhoods in Nashville. So we went to this process. Back then, you had to get 70% of all the owners on the street. That's a pretty tall order. Now what it is you have to have 66%, 2/3 of all of the votes that are cast have to be in favor of the project. That's a big difference because before it was 70% of everybody. Now we're only looking at who's voting. And so if we hope a large number vote, but even if they don't, even if we get a small number of people voting, we look at that body of who voted and said, okay, 2/3 of the people voted for it, we're going to do the project. Is that clear how we do that? It's just like a normal election. A normal election doesn't need a certain number of people to vote for it to be valid. We do it the same way now. We just take a vote. The nice thing about that is at 6 weeks, we're done. That petition process, people were toiling for months and months, and it was very difficult. So we know where we stand at the end of 6 weeks. That's been really helpful. I think that covers it. Any question? By the way, when you get a card, there's a QR code that you point your phone at. There's also a telephone number. There's also just a website you go to. And if you use the website, it takes you to Nashville.gov where you've got an online ballot page. You just tell some information. There's a little code that comes on this card. You enter that code in so we know, the right people are voting that we intended to. And you vote, you like it or not. That's it. That's correct. If one owner owns a bunch of properties, they only get one card. Only one person can vote. Only one owner can vote per street. If somebody owns properties and own Rowan and Rebels, they'll get one card for each. Okay. We were having instances where we had owners that owned, they own the whole street, and so they got to decide for or they own half the street, and so they basically got the sole decision, because so we've gone to you get one vote regardless of how many properties you own. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, that's a few minutes late.
Mm-hmm.
Plans have it already.
Okay.
But the plans that you have for our neighborhood are very good. I want to know, do you have any particular highlight plan for this to get to take place?
And you all, it's like you've seen my slides. You're always on one ahead of me. That's great. So here's some information about timeline. If we have consensus tonight and you all say, looks good, we're ready to vote and move this process forward, we ask that you give us 2 to 3 weeks. I don't think we need it. I think our plans are good, and we could probably, what's tonight? Monday? Probably by the end of this week, we'll have it online and probably have cards out early next week. But we like to say, give us 2 to 3 weeks, we'll send those cards out. That'll be the first thing of time. That ballot, as I mentioned, stays open for 6 weeks after that. Okay, that already puts us into, middle of January, I guess, something like that. Assuming it passes, we order materials. That's our first big backlog. The material ordering is, first of all, we and the other people, I guess, are ordering a lot of these things, but getting that material takes some time. So we're right now at 12 to 16 weeks just on that. That's 3 or 4 months. So now we're in the springtime. And then once we get the material, again, we've just got a backlog of projects we're working through. So it's another. So that's probably putting us into that. It sounded a minute ago, we were talking about late summer. You're like, we'll be done before then. In all likelihood, it'll be about that time, maybe even a little after. So we'll be watching that. There'll be a lot of construction activity about that time in the neighborhood, but that's where we are. I hate saying those, but that's the honest look about the time it takes from this point for these. So very good question. That is really, here's some information about, if you think of other questions and want to reach out, feel free. Again, I'm Jeff Hammond, and I'm Jeff Hammond at BirchTransportation.com. Gil Thomas is our program manager who is the NDOT employee in charge of that. Feel free to, Gil's terrific and very responsive. Feel free to reach out to him as well. That's all I've got for you tonight. Any other questions on the plan or ballots or time frame or anything?
This is a call meeting, so this is at least item on our agenda tonight. So now we can come to ask question and answer. So we're ready to move with the next step. I think we're all ready. I think get this in. We're in the summer. You know, the speaking seems to ramp up with the loud. So down to speed with the loud music. Makes me like this. Maybe down slow down and slow the music. You know, the newer cars, when you slow down, your music volume slows down. Yeah, so that would be great.
I don't have a loud music tool, unfortunately. Yes, I did.
It's just a newer car automatically goes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that'd be great. Those Camaros and Chargers that you're speeding up and down, doing donuts. Great.
Mhm. Mhm. Same thing. What our experience has been, though, if you've driven Buchanan Street or some of these that have them where bike lanes are, they get hit a lot. They get hit all the time. And, you know, especially when you're narrowing the lanes and you got a lot going in a very urban neighborhood like that and things are a lot tighter. These, you know, it's just one every so often. So every 500 feet, you've got one of these things. Our experience is they're not getting hit nearly as much. That's the goal. I mean, we're glad about that. We don't want them hit. So, because I know as soon as they get hit, they don't look as good. And then sometimes they go missing and all, you know, all these kind of things. So, but we really do have to have something, you know, to keep cars from driving around it. The other thing is too, we will get some complaints sometimes. People walk in the neighborhood, I know they do, and that's a good part about having such a wide street. You got plenty of room out there, and so this doesn't hinder that. You know, you just walk around it. It's just a little pole there on the side of the street where you would normally be walking. So it's, I don't see any issue there. Again, thank you all so much for your participation in this process, for your interest in the program. We're excited about moving forward. I wish we could do it a little bit more quickly, but appreciate Ms. Johnson and Councilmember Toombs for great support in working with us in this neighborhood. So thank you very much.
I don't really have anything to add. I'll just do my part. Whatever it is, but I'm here. I think another big reason in getting downtown is people are expecting reading for the holiday, so they'll be more active at your mailbox. They'll be more active to see what's in there because they're expecting something. So we'll, along with items this year, we'll have an opportunity to have a solution for our neighborhood. So it is, I just want to go ahead and thank the hearing, the team, appreciate you. I look forward to getting digital copies, my presentation, and including, and I'll be able to share it out with anyone, share with Ms. Johnson, and she can share it out and have our next general meeting. I'll have some copies of the slides, I'll print those out, so anyone can share it and have their own deck. So if there is no other